Afterward by Edith Wharton, narrated by ElaMayAbubacarEstillore from BSBA Department. An American couple seek to buy a house in England until her cousin, Edith, suggested a haunted house in Dorsetshire. Mary Boyney and her husband, Ned Boyney, settled on Ling in Dorsetshire. Mary asks about the presence of ghosts and is told by Edith there.
Oh, there is one, of course, but you will never know it until long afterward.
Settling happily at Ling, Mary and her husband, Ned Boyney, laughingly look out for their ghost that they will not know about till afterward, not really feeling too worried. However, Mary sees a figure walking toward the house as she and Ned Boyney watch from the roof. She starts to get a feeling for trouble that will follow. The front door stood open on the mild sunlight of the court, and the hall were empty. The library door was open. There she saw her husband, Ned Boyney.
What was it? Who was it? She asked.
Who? He repeated.
The man we saw coming towards the house.
He seemed honestly to reflect. The man? Why? I thought I saw Peters. I dashed out after him, say a word about stable trains, but he had disappeared before I could get down. He answered.
Disappeared? She asked.
That was all. The occurrence had been less than nothing. Weary with her thoughts, as he peered out into across the court, a figure shaped itself in the tapering perspective of Berline's. It looked a mere blot of deeper gray and grayness, a man with a hat. For the instant, her heart thumped to the thought.
It's the ghost!
She suddenly felt the man of whom 2 months earlier was on her distant vision, just now at this predestined hour. She went to her husband, feeling determined, and fear invades her.
It's really too absurd, but I never can remember.
Remember what?
That when sees the Ling ghost, one never knows it.
Did you think you'd seen it?
Why, I actually talked to you, my dear, in my mad determination to spot it.
Really? Dearest, you'd better give it up, if it's the best you can do.
Have you?
Have I what?
Given up trying to see a ghost?
I never tried.
Boyney said as he was tearing up the wrapper of newspaper. Feeling undetermined, Mary answered.
Well, of course, the exasperating thing is that there's no use trying, since one can't be sure till long afterward.
Later that day, Ned Boyney received a letter which Mary was filled curiosity as she knew the letter.
Ned, what is this? What does it mean?
This article was from Waikesha Sentinel, that a man named Elwell has brought a suit against me, that there is something wrong in the Blue Star mine.
But who is this Elwell? I didn't know the name.
Ned Boyney told her about Elwell and said that the things about him is settled, and that gave her a relief. As the brighter outer light that surprised her almost with a touch of summer when she issued from the house for her daily round of the garden. She had left Boyney at his desk, indulging herself as she passed the library door. In the garden, she heard footsteps behind her and turned expecting to see a gardener, but only figure was in sight. that of a young, slightly built man with a hat. The newcomer, on seeing her, lifted his hat and posed with the air a gentleman. Mary asked,
Is there anyone you wish to see?
I came to see Mr. Boyney.
Have you an appointment with Mr. Boyney?
Not exactly an appointment.
Then, I'm afraid, this being his working time, that he cannot receive you now. Will you give me a message or come back later? She replied.
The visitor, again lifting his hat, briefly replied that he would come back later, and walked away. Before he went away, he looked first at Peaceful House front. The encounter with his authority led to such far-reaching issue. Mary went to the library to see Need Boyney. The library was silent. She thinks that Mr. Boyney was busy with his work behind closed doors. Later that day, she asked the parlor maid to call Mr. Boyney for a lunch. But the maid just answered,
If you please, madam, Mr. Boyney is not upstairs.
Not in his room? Are you sure?
Yes, madam.
Where is he then?
He went out from the door with a gentleman.
Since Mr. Boyney gone out, he's never been back. Mary Boyney just asked and asked the maid about what had happened since a stranger came to their house. Based on the maid's description, she realized that it was the same youngish man with a hat she encountered in the garden. She felt the miseries. In the fortnight since Boyney's disappearance, there had been no word of him, no trace of his movements. She investigates but still no informations. Mary spent her lonely nights at the library where she last saw Mr. Boyney before his disappearance. Then there's Mr. Parvis. He explained everything that Mr. Boyney's disappearance had a connection with Mr. Elwell. The horror was sweeping over Mary in great deafening waves, since she remembers that it was the same Mr. Elwell that sent a letter to Mr. Boyney. Since Mr. Parvis told her about Mr. Elwell, she can't help but to ask in fear.
He shot himself?
She can't help but to have fear invades her. Mr. Elwell was already dead. Then Mr. Parris gave her a newspaper. There, she realized that Mr. Elwell, who already dead, and the stranger who came for his husband is the same.
It's the man! I should know him anywhere. He is the man who spoke to me in the garden.
Mr. Parvis calmed her and listened to what she is talking about.
I saw him twice. First is on the roof. He was dressed as he in the picture. My husband saw him first and he was frightened because he suddenly vanished. Second is in my husband's disappearance.
She felt horrible. Then she suddenly remembered what her cousin, Edith, said about the ghost.
You won't know till long afterward.